All right, welcome back, folks. So at yesterday's hearing, Senator Ron Johnson asked Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen if deficit spending could be one of the main causes of the inflation problem. Please take a listen.
Would you agree those are the top three causes of inflation? Deficit spending, high energy costs, and supply dislocations?
I don't believe that deficit spending is one of the main causes of inflation.
Man, that's totally awesome. Anyway, joining us now, the aforementioned Senator Ron Johnson. Mr. Johnson, welcome back to the show, sir. I mean, I think that's wonderful that she doesn't think deficit spending or just overspending. And, of course, she was in denial about inflation from day one, just like the rest of that crowd. So here we are. Inflation is the cruelest tax of all, and it's caught up to the banking system. So what do you think? How did that hearing go? Did she circle back or what?
Well, Larry, she didn't give me any confidence that we got the A team in charge of this. Now, I asked her, do you know what the dollar that you held at the start of the Biden administration in January 2021 was worth today? She didn't know. I gave her the answers, 87 cents. But no, I thought it was rather astounding that she also didn't know. She came to testify about the president's budget. So I was just asking her basic facts, and she didn't know that the budget was projecting to add $17 trillion to our nation's debt over the next 10 years, driving our total debt up to $50 trillion. She was fumbling around looking for her notes. I mean, to me, it's unbelievable she didn't have that off the top of her head. But again, this administration is delusional. They are in a state of denial. And we all know it's this massive deficit spending that has sparked inflation. This banking crisis right now, hopefully not a crisis yet, but it's certainly concerning. It's all been caused by massive deficit spending and inflation. And if you want to point a finger of blame at anybody, I would certainly include members of Congress that have routinely voted for this deficit spending. They're all going to blame everybody else. But look to Congress, look to the administrations that have been spending like there's no tomorrow.
Did Ms. Yellen at any point acknowledge that inflation was a problem, regardless of its cause?
Not really. Again, she did not seem very well prepared. She was just trying to run out the clock. We only get 5 minutes of questions, and then the chairman cuts us off if we go over that. So it's hard to really develop a line of questioning there. But no, I mean, she was just, early on, she testified and, said everything was all well, like Kevin Bacon in Animal House, all's well. And as Professor Scott and you were talking about earlier, and by the way, Kim Strauss has an excellent article in the Wall Street Journal today. You're laying out the problems here. There's so much negligence on the part of the bank executives, on the part of the bank board, on the part of bank examiners, on the part of this administration. This should not have happened. You could easily provide that liquidity. You could get out in front of this thing. This shouldn't be happening right now, but it is happening, and an awful lot of it is because these banks they've got their eye off the ball, and instead they're worried about ESG, they're worried about DEI, they're worried about all this wokeism when they should be worrying about fiscal and financial soundness.
Going back to Ms. Yellen, I mean, as you recall, Senator Johnson, she was one of the deniers early in the game. And then I remember she went on CNN. We call it the hostage video in early 22 when she finally acknowledged that inflation was a problem. But in her testimony yesterday, she described the economy in early 21 when they came into office and were inaugurated. I think she used the word calamity or calamitous or something like that. When the economy was roaring, it was growing at 6.5%. And she basically, my point here is, she picked up the same untruths that her boss, Joe Biden, has been spouting and spewing for the last 2 years, how horrible the situation was. He always calls the economy reeling, and he had to save it. And they wouldn't listen to Larry Summers, Democrats. They wouldn't listen to Jason Furman. They certainly wouldn't listen to conservative economists like us. I mean, she's wrecking her reputation. I don't know why. She doesn't have to, but she's wrecking her reputation. She wasn't a bad Fed chair at all, and she wasn't bad at CA, but she just has bought into this Biden, I call it untruthfulness about the state of the economy. And those chickens have come home to roost.
Well, they all have, and they're all going to line up behind President Biden and agree with anything he lies to the American public about. But you're right, the economy was roaring back. I was concerned about stagflation in early 2021. So I was voting against all that massive deficit spending. It was just going to spark inflation, harm our economy, and now we're in the throes of it. And as you're well aware, this is a difficult cycle to break out of.
Yeah, it is. Once inflation comes, it's very hard, and the Fed's going to have some very brutal decisions to make. What are you hearing back home? It looks like you are home. You got community banks out there. What are they talking about? I mean, the idea of moral hazard. Silicon Valley banks get to get their uninsured deposits guaranteed, but perhaps in Wisconsin, the local banks do not. What's going on there?
Well, my guess is the local banks here in Wisconsin are well run. They're community banks. They get deposits from community members. They make loans to community businesses and to farmers and that type of thing. And that's what will be a real tragedy. If this thing turns into a contagion, it doesn't have to be that way. These are a few banks that did some really stupid things. Their management were, again, more concerned about ESG than they were about financial soundness. And that can impact all these other banks that did nothing wrong. So let's hope the Fed can step up the plate. As Professor Scott said, they need to make a strong statement, talk about this is a liquidity issue. We will provide the liquidity. There's no reason for this contagion to go further, and end it now.
All right, Senator Johnson, we appreciate you and I are going to talk some on the radio tomorrow. I'm excited about that. We'll have a lot of time to go through everything. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, thank you, sir.